Hello dear readers and subscribers. Today we have a crash course Modern and Contemporary Art History planned. We're going to have a stroll through history encompassing all the key art movements and groups of artists of the past 150 years. If you ever get lost in art history, especially from the 1950s and onwards, you're not alone because it gets increasingly complicated, and at the end of our crash course we'll also explain why it gets so complicated, because there are a few flaws with art and historiography as we know it today. And to conclude, make sure to watch until the end of this video because I'm going to answer one of the most asked questions when it comes to art history here on this channel and when I'm doing lectures at universities. What are the art movements of today? Sit back and enjoy.
Modern art refers to art created during the era of modernism, roughly spanning from 1850 to 1950, though its boundaries are fluid and not universally agreed upon. Some trace its beginnings as early as 1830, with movements like Romanticism, Symbolism and Realism introducing innovative subject matter. However, a symbolic starting point is often the 1863 Salon des Refusés in Paris, where works like Manet's controversial Déjeuner sur l'herbe made a clear and symbolic statement, moving away from the traditional genres of the art academy and sparking public debate. Modern art is marked by its break from tradition, exploring new styles, subjects, forms of expression and innovation. Starting with Impressionism, sought to capture the immediacy of life using loose visible brushwork and vibrant color palettes, often painting en plein air to portray contemporary scenes, landscapes and moments of modern urban life. Post-Impressionism utilized bold, also contrasting colors, dynamic compositions and had a heightened sense of individuality. Marked by extensive studies of color theory, they also developed techniques such as pointillism and the exploration of primitivism. Fauvism and its non-naturalistic use of color and dynamic, stylized compositions to convey feelings rather than to describe form or space. By doing so, Fauvist artists rejected subdued tones and realistic depictions in favor of pure, unmodulated colors applied in bold, expressive strokes. Cubism deconstructed subjects into geometric shapes and depicted them from multiple perspectives simultaneously, creating fragmented and abstracted compositions, reflecting the complexities of modern life and the influence of advancements in science and technology. Futurism celebrates the ideals of technology, speed, modernity, and industrial progress. Futurist works often depict movement and energy through dynamic compositions, fragmented forms, and bold use of color, visualizing the vibrancy of urban life. Expressionism emphasized raw emotion, personal experience, and subjective interpretation over realistic representation, using distorted forms, exaggerated lines, and intense, often non-naturalistic colors, aiming to convey the inner turmoil, anxieties, and existential concerns of the modern world. Dadaism, an anti-art movement born out of the devastation and disillusionment following World War I, emerging as a radical response to the perceived failures of society and culture, using experimental techniques such as ready-mades, collages, and acts, often incorporating satire and nonsensical elements to provoke and confuse. Suprematism as the first major art movement focusing on pure abstraction and basic geometric forms such as squares, circles and rectangles. It sought to convey universal, spiritual truths through minimalist compositions. Constructivism sought to merge art and life, emphasizing functional design, industrial materials and a utilitarian approach to creativity, redefining the role of art as a tool for social but also political transformation. De Stijl aimed to achieve universal harmony through the use of geometric abstraction, primary colors, and a strict reliance on horizontal and vertical lines. Surrealism aimed to unlock the unconscious mind and explore dreams, fantasies, and irrational imagery. Influenced by Freudian psychoanalysis, it aimed to reveal hidden desires and emotions through techniques like automatic drawing, dream analysis, and juxtapositions of unexpected elements. Abstract expressionism emphasized individual expression and the exploration of the subconscious, often drawing on psychological theories such as those of Carl Jung. There were two primary approaches: gestural and action painting with Jackson Pollock and Franz Klein, which highlights dynamic physical gestures, and color field painting by Mark Rothko and Barnett Newman, which emphasizes large, flat areas of color to evoke emotional depth. Contemporary art typically refers to art by artists born after 1945. Post-war art refers to all art created after 1945. And postmodern art refers to all art of the postmodern art movements. For instance, the Mark Rothko chapel paintings from 1965 are not contemporary art, because Mark Rothko was born in 1903. However, it is post-war art as it was created after 1994, and it is modern art because it is part of the modern art movement of abstract expressionism. On the other hand, Joseph Kossut's 1 and 3 chairs from 1965, the very same year of most of the paintings of the Mark Rothko chapel, is contemporary art, as Kossut was born in 1945. It is also post-war art because it was created after 1945. And, instead of being modern art, it is postmodern art, as it is part of conceptual art, one of the many postmodern and contemporary art movements we're about to discuss, starting with minimal art, emphasizing simplicity, geometric forms, and the materiality of the artwork itself, stripping art to its most essential elements, often employing industrial materials and repetition. Conceptual art, prioritizing ideas and concepts over traditional aesthetic or material concerns, as a response to the commercialization of art as decoration for the wealthy. It often includes texts, installations, found objects, acts, interventions, and more, emphasizing the artist's intent rather than the final product. Pop art both celebrated and critiqued consumer culture, mass media, and popular imagery, incorporating elements from advertising, comic strips, and everyday objects, blurring the boundaries between high art and popular culture. Photorealism sought to replicate photographs with meticulous precision, prioritizing technical mastery, attention to detail, and hyper-realistic effects, frequently depicting everyday scenes, objects, and urban landscapes. Fluxus, performances, activities, and interventions emphasized the process of creation over the finished product, embracing spontaneity, humor, and chance as integral elements, and often created works that were participatory, interactive, and irreverent, breaking down the distinction between artist and audience. Performance art. The artist's body is the central medium in live, ephemeral, and often shocking actions, using performance as a direct way to address social, political, and cultural issues. Feminist art, a response to gender inequalities in the art world and broader societal structures, aiming to challenge the male-dominated canon of art history, often exploring themes such as identity, body politics, and empowerment. Arte povera, aimed to critique industrialization and consumerism through the use of humble, everyday materials, incorporating organic and industrial elements such as soil, wood, rags, and more. Post-painterly abstraction, characterized by its focus on flatness, color, and clarity of form, rejecting the emotional and gestural abstract expressionism, resulting in clean, expansive fields of color, hard edges, and sharp contrasts. Op art, characterized by its use of geometric patterns and precise color contrasts to create optical illusions of movement, depth, and spatial ambiguity. Land art, using natural landscapes as both the medium and the subject, creating large-scale interventions to move art out of the confines of gallery spaces, encouraging reflections on environmental stewardship and human existence within a broader ecological framework. Street art, murals, graffiti, and urban interventions that transform public spaces into canvases for creative expression, often serving as a powerful voice for public, social, and political commentary. Video art, employing moving images as its central medium, and unlike traditional film or cinema, Video art often focuses on non-linear narratives and experimental techniques, prioritizing visual and conceptual innovation over storytelling. Immersive art. Interactive experiences as the viewer can enter the work, combining elements such as light, sound, digital technologies, and sometimes even scent and tactile components. Immersive installations transform spaces into experiential environments. Digital art uses digital technology as both a creative tool and its medium, encompassing a wide array of practices, including computer-generated imagery, digital installations, virtual reality, augmented reality, and interactive media. Neo-expressionism revived painting's emotional and gestural qualities as a reaction against the conceptual and minimal art that dominated the mid-20th century, emphasizing subjective experience over ideas and reason. Alongside these international art movements, more local trends, schools, and groups are also part of recent art history. Some groups worked and exhibited together very closely, while others are based on stylistic similarities, or simply because they worked and emerged onto the art scene simultaneously and in the same area. Starting with Cobra, named after the initials of the cities Copenhagen, Brussels, and Amsterdam, emphasized spontaneity, intuition, and the use of vivid, expressive colors, drawing inspiration from folk art, children's drawings, and the untamed creativity of the subconscious, embracing a raw, primal aesthetic that reflected the chaotic and fragmented post-war world. CAI Art Association explored the intersection of material performance and action, known for their innovative use of non-traditional materials and emphasis on the physical creation process. The group staged experimental performances, interactive installations, and above all, dynamic paintings. Zero Group sought to redefine art by focusing on light, space, and materials, emphasizing purity, simplicity, and innovative techniques to explore immateriality and the void. School of London, a loosely affiliated group of figurative painters in post-war London who focused on the human figure as a central theme, reacting against the dominance of abstraction, exploring themes of mortality, alienation, and intimacy with intense emotional depth. By area figurative movement, a reaction reintroducing the figure against the dominance of abstract expressionism, employing dynamic brushwork, vibrant landscapes, and a tactile approach to composition, often portraying everyday scenes. Capitalist realism, German art group that emerged during the Cold War, critiquing consumer culture and the ideological divide between capitalism and communism, influenced by pop art, employing irony and satire to question the values and contradictions of consumer culture. Viennese Actionism, a radical and controversial performance art movement in Austria that sought to confront societal taboos, both a critique of post-war Austrian conservatism and an exploration of existential and psychological themes. Young British artists, known for bold, provocative, and often controversial works, their entrepreneurial approach, and the ability to capture the zeitgeist of late 20th century Britain. Neue Leipziger Schule, New Leipzig School, centered around figurative painting and the Leipzig Academy of Visual Arts, characterized by its blend of traditional techniques and surreal elements. The Cluj School, renowned for emphasizing figurative painting and conceptual depth, reflecting the region's complex socio-political history and the uneasy transition from a dictatorial communist Romania to an early capitalist one. A first very clear problem with all these art movements is that traditional art historiography aims to provide a framework to understand history by putting things into a box with a clear name, a clear description, a set of key characteristics, key representatives, and also some clear dates. However, in reality, this is never the case, but this is a bit too arbitrary and also lacks nuance. Art history is not linear. They are a large web of many different rivers, with even more meanders, in which water runs from one stream into the next, feeding each other, coexisting, going all the way down, or sometimes washing ashore and coming to a standstill.
Another clear issue with art history is, of course, that it is invented in Europe and then predominantly practiced in the West, in the States and in Europe, hence being very focused on Europe and the States, of course, and especially very Eurocentric. So please note that some meanders are often forgotten. For instance, in this video and in most publications, we don't see North American Ashcan School or American Regionalism, as is the case with Latin American Muralism or Japanese Monoha, and many more. For instance, smaller European movements such as l'Enabie in Paris or the aesthetic movement in Britain. Another very confusing drawback of art historiography is that it uses different criteria to form an art movement. Sometimes this can be stylistic innovation, which was very much the case, especially during modern art. However, it can also be the subject matter or a group that is in a similar location, or it can also be an innovation in terms of an artistic discipline, which makes it even more confusing. For instance, conceptual art is a historical art movement of the 60s and 70s, but is also an artistic discipline today. Confusing to say the least, and important to know this distinction. So, when answering the big question, what art movement are we in today, or what are the art movements today? Well, first and foremost, today we have many neo and post-art movements, which are actually artists who are building upon the principles of an historical art movement and are integrating them in new ways. For instance, one could say with Maurizio Cattelan, who uses the principles of Dadaism, that he is a neo-Dadaist. Or, for instance, in the 80s and 90s, there were many artists who continued to practice conceptual art, but were not part of the historical era of conceptual art of the 60s and 70s, so they called it neo-conceptualism. But we can actually take this a step further. In this postmodern era, in this era of meta-modernism, one could argue we also live in a post-art movement era. The model of art historiography, in which it looks for stylistic innovation. Who was the first to do this? Who was the first to do that? Or innovation of artistic disciplines has become totally irrelevant and not applicable to the developments of the past 50 years in art history. We had so many different art movements when painting, sculpture, drawing, printmaking were being explored stylistically and also in terms of the subject matter through modern art, in which there was still this idea of linear art history progressing, and with the arrival of postmodern art, the definition of art was being broken up. It braked totally open. It was redefined with new artistic disciplines. So painting, sculpture and drawing got accompanied by new art forms: video art, digital art, installation art, conceptual art, etc. However, abstract painting did not end with abstract expressionism, and video art did not end with the end of the historical era of video art. For instance, figurative painting today is alive and well. Old master techniques are still being implemented, but from a contemporary perspective. Abstract painting remains relevant, both in its expressive and more minimal outings. Sculpture stands strong, from hyperrealism to conceptual found objects. And the more recent artistic disciplines do not disappear in the folds of art history either, even though many argued time will tell if these art forms are truly art. Performance, installation, and video today are indispensable. So the movements of the past are not necessarily temporary, nor are they mutually exclusive. They exist and are being used fluidly by artists today. So does this mean art history has come to an end? No. And if you're thinking that way, then you're still stuck in the obstinate legacy and way of thinking of modernism, of the first half of the 20th century with that linear idea of art history. Artists are continuously drawn to new things. Think of the recent renaissances in textile art or in ceramics. But make no mistakes, these developments are not random trends for pure aesthetic pursuits. They say something about our world today as they emerge individually from hundreds of studios across the globe. If all of a sudden collectors and artists are drawn to this something, then it is because it means something for today. Because it consists of something we urge for, that we're missing, or that is very telling for how we feel and for today's zeitgeist. So even though there are no new grand art movements as it used to be in the 20th century with stylistic innovation and new artistic disciplines, there are still a lot of new things, new trends, new developments in art. In many ways, art is the blueprint of our world. It is a mirror of society and of life. As Heraclitus said, no person steps in the same river twice, because it is no longer the same river, and they are no longer the same person. The same goes for art and art history. Feel free to read the complete article for this video with more extensive descriptions of the art movement that we've covered in this video, but also when it comes to the typical problems of art history to have a better understanding. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Feel free to watch our video on 5 artists to watch in 2025 next. Support us on Patreon and please consider subscribing to stay posted for more contemporary art. Bye.